Alright, it's another essay out of the book Public Administration. This is The Move Disaster by Jack Nagel. And it goes back to the early 1970s when this organization called Move started. It was pretty much a black movement in Philadelphia, in the Powelton Village, in the western parts of Philadelphia. And one leader started it with this idea that he wanted all life to be preserved. Even bugs were sacred. A white guy who was a graduate student, Donald Glassy, actually was teaching a class at the Community College of Philadelphia, and that's what helped attract people to this Move cause. Okay, it started out for the full name as American Christian Movement for Life, and then they turned it into an acronym called MOVE, M-O-V-E, and it's anything but moving, because they seem to found a house in the Powelton area, which is largely a black community, or at least a racially mixed community of people, and they have problems with cops, a lot of government issues, and there's a group of about 40 people who are trying to just live however they felt, like they just set up their own government or something, and things were getting filthy and disgusting even for that area of Philadelphia. And it got so bad, neighbors complained, government started requesting to do inspections, like with Saddam Hussein, and government wanting to go in to do inspections for nuclear or the chemical weapons. Well, these people are living in their own filth, creating their own chemical filthy environments, and the government wanted to go in to inspect, but those people didn't allow it. They said they would kill their own children before they allowed government to inspect inside the building. And one day, that white guy who helped Donald Glassy, who helped us teach classes and spread the word about this compassionate movement, he was caught filing a false information when purchasing firearms. So this guy is trouble. He turned, he became a squealer, a rat, and told where the other gun stashes were, because Move, this group that was for preservation of life, was buying guns illegally and just getting them as many as they could. The government thought that the Philadelphia thought they had all the guns, and so had a relaxed process of one day just going in and trying to get inside the building and taking everything out. But when they were ready, they set up these water cannons, which they call deluge guns, DELUGE guns. They were walking up to the building, and all of a sudden they started getting fired on, and they shot. That's when the police shot these water cannons into the basement to try to flood the members out. Okay, it looks like one cop died, and this is in 1979, I think. It was towards the end of the 70s. One cop was killed, 8 other cops and firefighters were wounded. So the firefighters actually were part of the gunfire, which is no good. And they exchanged, the cops shot in smoke and all this. Eventually they got rid of this. They pulled everybody out of this building, and that was that for a time. But the John Africa, whose real name was John something else. He started that family, and he started having people use the last name of Africa because that's where life began. It's kind of like starting the religion of Kwanzaa. Okay, another black guy started Kwanzaa. Just out of the blue, it sounds like, why not? That's what the Mormon leader John Smith did. He just kind of made up a religion out of the blue. People do it all the time. Scientology. So there's all kinds of these movements, these groups, religious groups, compassionate groups. That's when you got to be most aware. Is when they claim to be compassionate. That's when you got to be most scared of them. Okay, when they really emphasize that they're compassionate, you got to be extra concerned about them. All right, so this John Africa got charged, and then the charges were like dropped, and he was a free man. And then there was a period of a few years where it was just quiet, and I'm sure he was fulminating and planning and scheming over the failures of the previous setup. So he moved into a different neighborhood. His sister, of all places, he used his sister's house at 622 Osage Avenue in the Cobbs Creek section on the western edge of Philadelphia. So they're still both on the west side of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a huge, huge metropolis. Okay, it doesn't sound like the west side is so good, but this is supposed to be a better part of Philadelphia. He was 3 miles from Powelton, from that house he was ejected from. So this is a few years later, and in 1985, okay, things started getting bad again. They started all kinds of confrontations in the neighborhood as bugs were getting out of control again. The neighbors were getting threatened. They're using Move. They still use the name. They didn't disband the name. There's maybe like 15 people who were living in this house, but Move, you were using bullhorns and just saying all kinds of terrible things to the neighbors, and how the President Reagan needs to get shot and all this stuff. So in that time in the 80s, we got a new mayor of Philadelphia, and this is the first black mayor who won by a lot. There was a previous mayor who was very popular, but you're only allowed to serve 3 terms at a time. So he was in his 3rd term. He had to take a term off. Somebody else got into power, and then this mayor, after taking the time off, came back for a 4th term. But then that's when he lost to this Good, who is to be good as the black. Hugely popular among the blacks and whites. And what's interesting with this essay is they don't say it for a while that he's black. Okay, it wasn't until they tried to get the neighbors at this second Move fortification that the neighbors are complaining, and like they went to like a higher official who said, just keep quiet, all right? We want to get this black mayor, the first black mayor of Philadelphia to ever get elected in. We want him in, and we don't want these problems with Move, which is a black organization That's not very popular. We wanna suppress any poor outlines of black community groups or whatever, and that helped get the first black mayor in, and they promised that he would do something, and he sat on his thumbs pretty much. Okay, let's see, yeah, this so they tried to fumigate the house, and that's when the Africa guy, Conrad Africa, they're all last names Africa. He said, "These bugs are our brothers and sisters." That's just incredible to me. They want to live in their own filth. Okay, this makes me think of homeless camps in cities. Okay, I'm all for breaking up the homeless camps. This move problem, the move disaster, is a homeless camp as far as I'm concerned. It's very, very similar in nature, where you give them some time to set up in an area, and then they start becoming so territorial. They'll fight each other. If they're not fighting the cops, they're fighting each other. They become territorial, like that's their area. Like, I've been here for years. This is my house. You're not invited in. It gets bad. And then these move people, they weren't willing to move. Okay, and the mayor kept holding off on any serious decisions. Okay, and allowing the move to build up their fortifications, violating building codes by putting in all these, I don't know, whatever you call them, maybe gun turrets and bomb-proof walls and stuff, bringing in railroad ties and all this stuff to really set up for a battle. And the mayor really didn't want to do anything about it. He was hoping the situation would go away on its own. And that's kind of what it comes down to. Really, they don't focus at all on the racial part. They mention it here and there that it is largely black and whites. First black mayor move as a black group, but they're focusing on the psychological aspect of it a lot. Okay, and there's like 15, almost 15 pages of information here. I'm just trying to summarize. Yeah, the mayor was considered a hands-on type of guy. He had to get in the mix. He didn't like hanging out in the office too much. He wanted to get out there and figure out what problems were that he could solve. And I mean, he's got a stellar background the way it sounds. He was in the military. He was an officer in the military, like a captain, and he commanded 200 military police, and he had a lot of experience commanding. But when it came down to having to decide on how to handle this move, this Christian movement or whatever, that just was living in its own filth, and the neighbors were complaining, this mayor didn't want to do anything. He just wanted to let things slide and hope that things worked themselves out. But that's not the case. Things are getting worse and worse. Move had a bit of an agenda. There were kids involved too. They were driving the neighbors out of the community, and just causing all kinds of anarchy and chaos. So there's this book called Decision Making, which it makes me wonder if George W. Bush read Decision Making, because I just got this out of a Decision Points from George Bush. I only read a little bit of it, but nothing of substance. I got that book out of a little free library. That was surprising, and I tend to read it. But Decision Making really is something that he probably would have read, because this is good, by Irving Janis and Leon Mann. I should put that in the description, where they talk about there's such a challenge to reach a decision, and there's certain decisions that are just so difficult to make. Let's see, I like this quote. Although modern anxiety improves cognitive function, so you have people who have anxiety disorders, they have slightly improved cognitive function, people with anxiety. But if it gets to be too much, excessive stress can impair the quality of your decision processes. Okay, so having a little stress is good. Putting a little fire under your feet is good, but when it gets to be too much, then you start making very poor decisions. And just like George Bush, decision points, okay? He, in that video when he was first told about the towers coming down, he just sat there stunned. He experienced a large amount of excessive stress, and that caused him to just not make a decision at all. He was hoping it was irrational in a way. Yeah, when it just doesn't seem like there's any win to any of your decisions. You can't win in anything. You want to you hope and pray. Okay, you want to push back the time, whatever the word is. You want to. See, I'm so short on words for some reason. You want to celebrate, to wait to do the time away. Yeah, defensive avoidance. No overwhelming pressure. Yeah, when there's no overwhelming pressure to make a decision, then you're not going to be so quick to make that. You kind of have to be pushed in that direction. Defensive avoidance. There's all kinds of psychological problems that they're saying this mayor was going through. And I'm not sure if this essay by Jack Nagel would be on the internet. It's pretty good. And then when you actually have to make a decision, okay, when it comes to that point when there's a gun to your head, then you'll take the first choice that's available to you. Okay, and that's bad. That's what they're saying this mayor did. When it come, he was putting it off, whatever the word is for putting it off, and then it got to the point where he actually had to make a decision. Okay, because things were just getting so out of hands with the group. He just made the most hasty decision possible, and then he didn't want to be so hands-on because blood was on his hands with this. There was 11 people that died. Procrastinate, that's the word I want. There's 11 people who died in the house because apparently they dropped... A helicopter had to drop explosions on this house, the roof was fortified with all kinds of concrete and rebar and all that. They actually had gunmen on top of the house who were walking around, and they were jumping on the roofs of the neighbors, apparently, because this is a very tight house. This is the second house. The first house, you had actually a yard around it and all that. Yeah, people living too close together. But yeah, this is a situation that really was procrastinated for too long with this extremist group. Okay, and there's a lot. There's so much. So in conclusion, what the lesson is in the end for the mayor, because this is a public administration book, if you ever become mayor, be aware of this paradox, this problem with your behavior when you get to a situation where you have to make very stressful decisions. Okay, you got to recognize that if you're procrastinating on a decision, okay, you got to be aware of that. And then symptoms of hypervigilance, where you're actually pushed to the point having to make a decision, death or life. And you just grab the first decision. You got to think about that. You want to have a clear head when it comes to making decisions. Look at all the the good possible possibilities to decide on.